we're all aware of the coarse and negative public conversations on so many levels. So I would just like each of you just briefly to say, you know, how bad is it really in terms of the area that you serve, in terms of people feeling very deeply and strongly and not being very civil in terms of how they go about things? Who would like to jump in?
I mean, I certainly encounter it around state issues, but I sort of look at it, you know, I look at this presidential race. I think there's people who feel they have not been represented by the system, and this provokes a hostility. We were talking about that with respect to the issue of race. You know, people who feel shut out of the system, there is a deep sense of injustice, and I think in this cycle, we see it on the racial side, we see it in some of these voices in the national race. So I think we have to try to be reconcilers. So I don't begrudge people their voice. I certainly encounter it. I have people who put hostile things about me on Facebook that I can walk through my reasons for an issue, but they don't hear it, and therefore they conclude that the way I've conducted myself reflects a hostility and animus towards them, or bias, or something like that. Though I have a reputation as being thoughtful. So I think it is part and parcel of civil dialogue that you do encounter that. And I think, frankly, as a believer, I just think that's something that, you know, the world directed its anger against Christ, and he did not push back. He took the path he was supposed to take. You know, his love overcomes the cross, overcomes sin. I sort of think you have to have that spirit of the gospel. 40 years ago this April, I went to work in the Capitol as a young man, and I've always had the view, my job is to always walk in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. This is my job. And I may not always understand the path, but I serve a creative God, and he can help me find the path. I also think this is a very intellectual evening, but there's a great deal of mystery in life, and we do not always know, we do not see the totality. You know, thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a first century lamp was a clay pot with a wick that cast a tiny pool of light, and the only way you progress is step into the light. And so I look at speak the truth in love, so that you may grow into the head. You do have to speak. I hear the fruit of the Spirit, forbearance, self-control. You do have to not ape the world, not engage in conversations the world might, but with love, forbearing in some respects, and being just trusting God for the outcome. He is the God of the book of Esther. And he is working whether you see him or not, and so we need to walk into the light, follow the light we have, but we do need to speak. And so I appreciated the account on the race issues. There are issues in our society that people do need to speak, but we need to speak in love.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you were, you know, put into a tough assignment. I wanted you to think back a ways in terms of Oak Park, because as some of those changes took place, they were pretty controversial in terms of moving Sacramento High School to charter school and those kinds of things. And I'm sure you encountered some disagreement and challenges that you faced at that time.
Sure. So, I mean, we could go back. We could go to the present, you know, and we can talk about challenging issues that educators are facing today. But even just stepping back for a moment, Gabe Lyons just made a comment. He said, you know, America, and I'm paraphrasing, America appears to be, you know, like receiving a civic lesson, right? Like currently. And if I look through the lens of the 6.2 million students in California, I also get concerned in terms of the modeling that exists around dialogue around challenging issues. We know that students are always reflecting in terms of trying to identify their own identity and purpose. So let me continue to paint the picture of California. So we once again have about 6.2 million students. 53% approximately of the students are Latino, 26% Caucasian, 9% Asian, 6% African American. We live in a very diverse state. And when you think about the controversies and the challenges that we're facing today, the ability to have a constructive dialogue becomes very important, and to see how that's modeled. So yes, we could talk about the challenges that occur within a community if you're looking at what does it mean to turn a school around and what is the right approach. Or we could talk about just my last 9 months, and in a very abbreviated fashion, we're dealing with discussions even within this past month of a Senate bill where citizens can approach a superintendent, and if they possess a concealed weapon permit with the permission of a superintendent, they can carry that weapon onto campus. There's very differing views right now in terms of what safety looks like. There's discussions right now in terms of gender issues. Regardless of where you stand on the position, should a transgender child be able to have access to the locker room? What does that look like from a bathroom standpoint? What does that look like when kids go out on a trip? Immigration, refugee issues. And I'll end on one last example. So I was asked to give a presentation on Common Core, which is the new academic standards, and you see that across 42 states. And I thought it'll be a very quiet Friday evening. Who in the world is going to want to show up to a Common Core presentation, right? I walked up to the building. It was overflowing. People wanted to come in. Yes, there were parents who were homeschooling their child, traditional schools. Yes, it was very clear you had individuals who were leading from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party. The Tea Party was present. The state of Jefferson was present. It was a very lively discussion. So from parents to students to all of these core issues, education is a microcosm of what's occurring in the world, and they need quality models.
Yeah, good word, Ed. Bonnie is in Placer County, and I'm not sure whether they're going state of Jefferson or not. Yeah. So, Bonnie, yeah. And what has your experience been, just as a councilwoman, and in terms of dealing with some challenging or contentious issues in the context of city government?
Sure. So, fortunately, we have a group of council members that work well together for the most part, and we don't air our dirty laundry in public, thank goodness. So we get along well, but there are interest groups. There's always interest groups, and there are always people who have different opinions than what I might have. And what I've found is it doesn't do any good to alienate somebody if we disagree, because I have to work with these folks. I see them in the grocery store, they're advocating on issues, and somebody may do something that I really disagree with, and I've had this happen. A man advocated something and did some really sort of nasty things towards the council members. And I like the guy, I've known him for years, and I looked at him and I said, I do not like what you did. I do not like it at all. But I want you to know I'm still gonna work with you. So I'm just gonna put it aside, I'm gonna forget about it, and we're gonna move forward. Now, one of my colleagues walked up to him. I'm sitting with the same gentleman, did the same thing to my colleague. He walks up and just blasts this man, just blasts him, and walks away. The man looked at me and said, well, I'll make his life more difficult in the future, right? And I thought, I'm so glad I responded really out of the way Christ would want me to respond. And I think that that's the most important thing. We might disagree, but I can hold my tongue and I can say, how would I respond? How do I need to love this person in this situation? Because before you know it, I've got to work with this person on another issue. And so how do I not alienate? How do I love regardless? And it's hard sometimes.
Yeah. Hold
that tongue, go home and yell and scream, complain to my husband, but in public, I'm going to honor everyone. That's what God has really made very clear to me. I need to honor everyone, no matter how hard it might be.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the challenges that every public official faces, and especially for those like the three of you who are committed to it in your personal faith in Jesus Christ, that you you have to balance your personal faith with the fact that you've been elected to represent all of the people in your city or in your district or in your county, and to advocate for the good for all of them. How do you deal with that kind of internal tension as you deal with that? Bonnie, you just shared that in public you remain calm and remain focused, and you're able to have a little bit of a lightning rod moment maybe later on to deal with that. What are some of those struggles, the ways that you deal with that personally, so that you can remain poised in the context of your elected position?
There was something, Rob Jensen is our city manager in the city of Roseville. He's a believer. I love him, and I know he's where he's supposed to be right now. And he had a mom who said to him, this is when you determine what to say. Is it kind, is it true, or is it necessary? And if it's 2 out of 3, then maybe it's okay to say. Is it kind, true, or necessary? And that has actually really helped me to stop and speak or not speak, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen, 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 and wait to respond. Sometimes people just want to speak. And I was knocking doors the other day, knocking on doors because I'm campaigning as well, and a woman came to the door and she just let me have it. I mean, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and I listened and I heard her, and her friend kept trying to get her to stop. And I said, you know what, it's okay. She can tell me what she thinks I want to hear. It's okay. And she just needed to be heard. So sometimes people just want to be heard, and I just have to listen with a smile. Yeah. And I might learn something, right? Because if I listen, they might have some very good points.
Ken or Ed, anything on that, on how you grapple with your own, balancing your personal faith and also knowing that you're representing all of the people in your district?
Sure. So completely aware and sensitive to the fact that I'm representing all the entire constituency, and in this case in El Dorado County. But I would describe it this way personally, how I anchor in the middle of ambivalence or challenge. Prayer is oxygen, right? So, I mean, I could speak to since 1987 when I was traveling from visiting my parents into Sacramento, and I would be praying for this city, various individuals all the way throughout the state of California. To this morning, on a regular basis, I wake up, I make a call to a brother. We were praying at 5:30 in the morning, every morning for anywhere from the children in the state of California to the work that we do. And that's how I personally anchor. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, the goal and desire is to demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control in every setting, in every circumstance, in every decision.
That's great. Good. Ken, do you have a word?
Well, prayer is right. I often think of David, who in Samuel is being pursued by Saul in the desert of Ziph. And he's in an isolated place, and Saul's coming after him, and it looks bleak. And a report comes to Saul that the Philistines have invaded the kingdom, and it diverts Saul from getting to David. And I often in the public realm just believe that God is still at work. So when I'm faced with very difficult things, a prayer is the desert of Ziph prayer, that God will work to redirect the flow of things around me for things I cannot address. Work in the public realm is a lot like pool. You watch the pool greats, they set up the thing, they break the rack. One by one, the pros will sink every ball. It's a marvel to watch because the cue ball always ends up ready for the next shot. They've planned their game. And that's a picture how to be efficacious in the public realm. It is working relationships, and you always have to keep your eye on those relationships. And so I do think you need to be a strong advocate, but you do need to kind of keep an eye on your ongoing ability to work with people, to try to be influential. And the last thing, a tip I would have, if you're dealing with public officials of any stripe, if you feel they've done something well, they've approached an issue in a thoughtful way, you approve of that, let them know.
Yeah.
It's sort of an admission against interest, but I would say most elected officials are like good salespeople. They will pick up what sort of values you are expressing to them in a conversation, and then they will sort of be reinforced to do that. And I definitely think you can use that in a subtle way with public officials to kind of affirm conduct you like by making sure they know that you thought that was outstanding.
That's great. So as we think about the advancing good side of things, what can you do out of this? You can think about your assembly member or your state senator or maybe another elected official, and when you catch them at doing something good and being civil, not only hearing about the times where you disapprove of something, but what are they doing that is exhibiting good leadership? Just as we close, Ed or Bonnie, do you have something in terms of the advancing good side? What's one thing that can be done maybe with a superintendent or a principal or somebody in an educational role, Ed or Bonnie, with the city council, where people can actually show their public official what they can do in terms of promoting the idea of civil public discourse?
So my understanding, there's over 170 democracies in the world, right? And I know that the United States, we rank right around 134 when it comes to voter participation, right? And if you were to look at a survey of seniors in California in particular, less than 50%, or I should say a little over 50%, will say we don't feel that it's really our responsibility to get involved in local or state issues, right? So again, this idea of civic engagement in the context of what we're dealing right now, while we're, on Monday, if you watch the debates, you just feel the tension inside. It is actually an opportunity right now for, I think, young people to be able to get engaged. And the way that occurs is our educational leaders or teachers or parents, for that matter, really taking the time, as I think Ben was saying, walk in people's shoes, be able to listen to young people and listen to their stories. Again, it's a place where when people are feeling valued and are able to express safely, then it opens up the door to talk about real issues. And I think students with real issues will start to be engaged all the more, and that needs to be occurring all throughout the various generations in California.
Outstanding. Thanks, Ed. Bonnie?
Certainly, you can vote, but I think one of the things as I've been on campaign, and I'll meet somebody and say, you didn't know I was your city council member, did you? And they're like, no, they couldn't have picked me out in a lineup. And that's because most people are really involved with their schools, with their kids, working, et cetera. They don't have time to worry about politics. And what they know, they see on TV, and so they don't think about the local electeds. And we influence your day-to-day life, hands down. You can actually affect change in your city. I'm affecting change in our city, and you can talk to me about that. So at a ground level, I'm affecting the residents' lives in our city, right? But people don't know who I am. But if you know an elected official and you're praying for them, please pray. More than anything, pray for our elected officials. I need your prayers. It's hard work. It's hard work. And it's a battle, right? So number one, please pray. But share with your friends those people that you support, because they know you and they trust you and they respect you. So they may not take the time, but if you take the time, you can influence an election. There are elections that are won by a handful of votes in some communities. It really does make an impact. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, that's good. Ken, a final word for us?
Well, I was going to say, if I was going to throw out one idea that anyone could go and do this election cycle, it's something I used to do in Rancho Cordova, and any church could do it. It's not advocacy. Stage a pancake breakfast in your community. Order from some company those white styrofoam hats like people have at political conventions, red, white, and blue ribbon on them. Invite to your pancake breakfast all the candidates running for any office in your community. Give every candidate a hat. Publicize to the community that if you want to meet people who want to represent you in local government, come to this pancake breakfast. There don't have to be any speeches, so there's no advocacy here. But the fact of getting candidates who want to represent the community in a political role to come face to face with people and simply be available so a stranger can come up and say, I see you got a hat on, what are you running for? It's a way to kind of build in your community a kind of sense that candidates come and meet people face to face. That is a very important basic democratic value, and you can build that pattern as simply as that. In my city, I did that back in 2008. They were most popular events. We had members of Congress, candidates for Congress, city council, community college school board members, park board members, everybody coming out, just a chance to meet, and to me, it's building this interaction at the ground level of people who want to represent the community will get out there and meet them.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to facilitate.
Yeah. So can you all, as we wrap up our panel discussion, if you can appreciate our panelists, thank you.